Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top stories: $30 million in U.S. funding funneled to a top scientist now leading China's AI race. Did federal agencies ignore warning signs? Lawmakers are demanding answers. The World Economic Forum drawing attention to AI development. One lawmaker saying the U.S. lead over China is thanks to recent sanctions. Is Beijing concerned about a China hawk's potential return to the White House? GOP frontrunner Donald Trump dropping hints while vowing to revive a tough on China stance. $30 million in federal research grants possibly dumped into China's artificial intelligence development. How did it happen? Lawmakers are demanding answers from the Pentagon. The key lies with a top AI scientist named Songchun Zhu. While at UCLA, he received $30 million in federal grants for his research on the most advanced AI technology, a tool that could prove useful for military applications. The bulk of the money he received came from the Pentagon. Zhu later went back to China. Now, he's leading China's efforts to develop high-end AI. Beijing and Washington are competing for dominance in AI. This technology is already becoming critical on the battlefield, and whoever takes the lead will have an edge in future wars. Now, lawmakers are trying to find out why the funding kept flowing to Zhu despite the warning signs. Congressman Mike Gallagher is the chairman of the House Select China Committee. Along with other lawmakers, he wrote letters to the Pentagon, UCLA, and the National Science Foundation for related documents. They accused federal agencies of ignoring red flags about Zhu and giving him money anyway. While working at UCLA, Zhu set up a parallel institute near China's Wuhan. He also took up a job at a Chinese university that supports research for the Chinese military. And to top it off, he joined China's Thousand Talents Project. Beijing is known to use the program to siphon Western technology, speeding up its own innovation. It works by hiring overseas talents and persuading them to transfer the technology to China. Examples include former Harvard chemistry professor Charles Lieber, a top researcher in nanotechnology. While working at Harvard, a Chinese university paid him to set up a nanotechnology lab in China. Meanwhile, Lieber's lab at Harvard kept receiving federal research grants. He was sentenced for lying to prosecutors about his ties to the Thousand Talents program. The House China panel said efforts to prevent adversaries from getting American innovation will only be effective if universities take responsibility in addressing this threat. How far is the U.S. lead over China in the AI field? The U.S. lawmaker says the answer is just months ahead. Washington's tightening curbs on microchips exports helped the U.S. gain the upper hand, but now it must keep that edge in its tech competition with Beijing. Republican Senator Mike Rounds made the remark on Tuesday at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He emphasized the U.S. lead is due to export controls on AI chips to China. Chips are the focal point of the first developing tech war. The White House expanded its restrictions on them 3 months ago, blocking Beijing from obtaining the high-end semiconductors themselves, plus chip-making technology and equipment. President Biden also signed an executive order to prohibit U.S. companies from investing in Chinese chip-related businesses. The move irked Beijing. In what appears to be retaliation, it recently banned exports of key metals to the U.S., which are essential to making microchips. Back to the AI competition, what makes it so significant? Senator Rounds said AI will influence future warfare, adding that the country that embraces AI technology in its military will, quote, have a leg up on everyone else. Communist China has a history of lacking transparency on its tech development, making it difficult for the democratic world to see the true picture of how advanced its sensitive technologies are. Anxiety in Beijing over a potential China hawk in the White House? That's what GOP frontrunner Donald Trump is hinting at, pointing to the turbulence in China stock markets following his Iowa victory. But another election is further complicating that scenario.
Well, this is really getting interesting because, Taiwan just had an election. We just had the Iowa caucuses. we're going to have a general election this year. And based on how the Iowa caucuses go, you could see President Trump back in the White House. If that occurs, how does the Beijing think that affects their strategy with regard to Taiwan?
A strategic friend of the U.S., Taiwan just elected its new president, William Lai. He's known as a China hawk. Meanwhile, former President Trump is planning to win more votes with his own tough-on-China stance. Rory Daniels, managing director of the Asia Society Policy Institute Center for China Analysis, described the Trump-Lai combination as Beijing's nightmare scenario. Now, Trump is preparing to win the Republican nomination in another state, New Hampshire. He's currently leading in the polls there. Looking forward to U.S.-China ties if he gets elected again, Trump said he wouldn't allow China to take advantage of America. During a rally in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on Wednesday, he vowed to return the country to better days.
One of the most important issues in this race is which candidate can rescue the American economy and save the American dream.
The New Hampshire primary is set for January 23rd, next Tuesday. There are no more debates scheduled before the vote. Real Clear polling averages show former President Trump with a 13-point cushion. The 2024 presidential campaign dominated by tough-on-China rhetoric. During a New Hampshire rally on Wednesday, presidential candidate Nikki Haley said that the U.S. should shift its perspective on China from viewing it as a competitor to an enemy. Drawing from her experience as the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki said China had, quote, always saw us as an enemy, and that's why the U.S. should do the same. Examples of the China threat include buying up U.S. farmland, fentanyl, trafficking, and stealing technology. She vowed to tackle those problems and pledged to end normal trade relations with China if elected. Another contender for America's top China hawk, presidential candidate Ron DeSantis. On Wednesday, the Florida governor identified a critical national security threat while speaking to voters, the U.S. border and China. He pointed out the presence of overwhelmingly military-aged males from China and Iran crossing the U.S. border, warning that Washington's enemies are exploiting that vulnerability. Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are now in a heated contest, competing to become the lead alternative to the Republican presidential candidate's frontrunner, Donald Trump. Taiwan's new envoy to the U.S. is promising to forge stronger ties with the United States. This comes just days after the island elected a new president who is pro-America and critical of the Chinese Communist regime.
I think under our new president's administration in May, 20th of this year, the U.S. policy towards Taiwan will continue to be the same, to continue strengthening our existing relations, and also based on common values for freedom and democracy. That policy will not change.
Alexander Yu is Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the U.S. He arrived in Washington, D.C. in December. Yu said U.S. relations with Taiwan have been rock solid in the last few years and added that's considering multiple fields, including the economy, security, and culturally. Taiwan is also trying to reach a trade agreement with the U.S. called the 21st Century Trade Initiative.
We've been going through talks of the 21st Century Trade Initiative, and we've already reached the first stage, in which U.S. Congress has already passed that first stage and signed by President Biden, and we're in the second stage of the dialogue for the 21st Century Trade Initiative.
The envoy said President-elect Lai Ching-te, also known as William Lai, will follow similar policies to his predecessor, President Tsai Ing-wen. Yu commented that the U.S. has approved a lot of security assistance to Taiwan, and he expects that to continue under Taiwan's new administration. The envoy also spoke about Taiwan's recent election. He said election results show the people of Taiwan want to keep the status quo with China. Staying in the Asia-Pacific region, the U.S. is trying to make better use of Japan's resources to bolster its military capabilities. The U.S. and Japan will look at the prospect of using Japanese shipyards to overhaul U.S. Navy warships and how effective it would be. U.S. Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel announced that plan at the U.S. Naval Base in Japan. He said repairing ships in Japan rather than in the U.S. would boost military deterrence in the region by keeping military assets in place.
If we ever have a hot situation, which I hope never happens as a father of a Navy officer and as an American, you don't want to start training and working together in that type of tense situation. You want to do it beforehand. That's why we train together, so therefore why we should repair and maintain together. And keeping ships in theater is part of our deterrence.
The ambassador said the plan could allow the U.S. to have better military deterrence against communist China. He noted that Beijing watches which ships enter and exit the region and evaluates U.S. deterrence accordingly. Japan hosts the biggest overseas concentration of U.S. military power, including the only forward-deployed carrier strike group. Most of the U.S. 7th Fleet is based in Japan. It commands up to 70 ships and submarines. The Philippines bolstering security ties with Canada amid Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. The two countries signed defense cooperation agreement on Friday, a move the Philippines' top defense official said could later lead to a troop pact between the two countries. The plan for possible military visits is called a Visiting Forces Agreement, the same deal the Philippines has with the U.S. It allows the rotation of thousands of American troops in and out of the Philippines for war drills and exercises. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than 2 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus. Or subscribe to our partner platform, Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Here's what to look out for in our second half. More information on the COVID-19 pandemic timeline, unveiled by Dr. Anthony Fauci in a 14-hour testimony. Lawmakers called some of what he said eye-opening. The Ukrainian president did not get to meet with the Chinese premier during the World Economic Forum. Reports suggest Russian influence may be behind the apparent snub. And the winners are up for NTD's International Figure Painting Competition. We have the latest from the awards ceremony in New York City. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.